Happy Friday. Welcome back to Ribbon Candy Hooking. I'm Deanna. Happy cocktail night. It is great to see you. We made it to Friday. It is our night. I was trying to create a nice vignette here. I'm feeling a little bit rushed. I'm about to have my cocktail too. Happy Friday. I hope you are on the verge of a beautiful, super summery weekend. I've got a great show planned for you. My thread looks strange, but we're going to go with it. Mom, you are on in time. I almost have my drink. I'm waiting for it to be brought to me. But something else came to me. Someone so cute. I wonder if you. Yeah. Come here, baby. You want to make your little cameo appearance? No, she's not camera ready. Good to see you, Mom. I was with my mom for the last couple of days. We had such a good time. I'll tell you what we were up to. It was just classic summer Huck Finn times with the kids, you know. Robin, cheers, my dears, in Wisconsin. Is that the whole? Okay, I got to be careful not to drink that whole thing. Good to see you, Robin, in Wisconsin. Yeah. G and B, hello, Helen, thanks. G and B, Kayla, is that you, G and B? I know. How cute. Gayla, of course. Oh, I'm just reading your thread. Linda, good to see you in Massachusetts. Karen, good evening. Great to see you. Cheryl, great to see you. Happy cocktail night. I hope I'm doing okay with volume and everything. Let me know if there are any problems. I'm scanning my desktop and making sure that everything looks okay. We'll see how it goes. It looks like it's usually busier on Fridays, but you know what? It's summer and it's crazy times. Linda Ann, great to see you. April, great to see you. All right, it looks like everything's working. Tell me if it's not. I put together a great show tonight, I think, something that I really liked. I have long admired the rug hooking artist, thank you, Polly, Polly, oh my gosh, seriously, like right here, right there, really? It's Wine Honey, you don't want it. Polly Minick. And she often works with, if you know the name, she often works with her sister, Lori Simpson. They work together on books because Polly is the rug hooker and, hold on, cheers, my dears. And her sister Lori is the quilter, and together that is perfect harmony, isn't it? They do really complementary pieces, and they work on a series of books together. We're going to look at those titles tonight. I have all of them, but I'm going to focus on one or two of them tonight because Polly has such a distinct style, and for me, it really personifies what summer is all about. You want to come up here and say hi? Honey, you are too cute, too cute. So that's what we're going to do tonight. I was kind of torn on what we're doing, but I know that... there's going to be tears. Is there going to be tears? There's going to be tears. Next week is going to be our gallery night, and many of you have been sending me your images of projects that you're working on, just finished, just starting, just thinking through and drawing out. Lots of that. Okay, that's her bone. I got nervous for a minute. I heard a gnawing sound. She's a bit active today because it's on the late side for her to be here. She's getting tired. And I appreciate all the great things that you've sent. If you have more things to send for next Friday gallery night, please send them during the week so I can kind of synthesize them and cull and get a nice show. I probably won't cull anything because I know it's all beautiful work. But get all that stuff together so that next Friday I can run a cocktail night, gallery night of our work. And then the following Friday, it will be our monthly bingo night. So I think I had an extra week in there. I'm sorry about that. I know you're all ahead of me usually, but we're gonna do it in that order. Next week, gallery week. The following week, bingo night again. Wendy, great to see you. Cheers from Western Pennsylvania. Good, coming through loud and clear. I never know when I get these wonderful updates that kill my sound, right? What a joy that is. Aileen, good to see you. Courtney, good to see you. Dare I ask, Courtney, are you still with Joy? Are sisters still together? Oh, I know it's so sad when you have to say bye to your sister, but I hope that you're still partying tonight. I hope so. Anita, good to see you. Cheers, my dears. Great to see you in Toronto. So, Gayla, you can send pictures to ribboncandyhooking@gmail.com, or you can Facebook me. I always get my Facebook messages too, just to my name or whatever. Just send anything that you've been working on, have worked on, just starting. It doesn't have to be a complete piece. It's sometimes very nice for us to look at pieces that have just been started or just been drawn out on backing because it gives us stuff to talk about, think about, looking at the way that other people work and start their projects. Is very inspiring and for new people, very informational and helpful, right? So anything is great. Carrie, great to see you in sunny Florida. Oh, little sun palm tree and little octopus down there. How cute is that? Back in North Carolina. Very happy to see you. I know you had a great time, and it sounds like you did some more dyeing. So I'm looking for those pictures. Maybe I'll put those in the gallery night. That would be great too, watching people dyeing and stuff and seeing the colors that you come up with, especially two amazing sisters working together on projects. Fantastic. So, what did I want to say? I have not gotten the Monet stuff up. I'm so sorry. It was a couple of days with my mom, and that was really nice. We're going to catch up on all that stuff in a minute. But I took photos of them just now when I returned to the studio. So I'll get the Monets up. Remember, they're in 4 sets of 4. That one's kind of lopped off, but I've got 4 fours, 5 fours. In the end, I did 5, didn't I? Because I added the pinks. That represent 5 of Monet's most famous and recognizable, really iconic works. And that Monet class is coming up, Designing Like Monet, so I'm working on that too. And if you are signed up for that class, you'll get that document with the stuff to print. If you feel like printing it and doing it in class time, we can work together on our games and our exercises that help further the conversation about how to design like Monet. Of course, he is in the public domain, but it's nice to kind of inject your own personality and style into a work and still have it really kind of resonate as Monet style work. So that's what our object is in these classes, and that one will be a lot of fun. Oh, good, Courtney, send those photos. So we'll talk about all that stuff. I have been working on Polly Minick because it was a couple of years ago when I just started ribbon candy hooking, January 2020 as a New Year's resolution. We didn't know what was going to happen immediately after that, did we? But I got to reading Polly Minick's books because her style for me is very linked to happy summer times, Nantucket times, Cape Cod, seashore times, like classic old time summer. And I thought this is a really good time of year to talk about Polly Minick because we touched on her a little bit last week when we were doing our patriotic episodes because she does so much. She does a lot of patriotic work, but she also does a lot with the colors white, blue, and of course red, white, and blue, patriotic. But she has one book that I'll cover at the end because I think it's the most recent that's just called Blue and White that she did with her sister, Lori Simpson, and a combo of quilts and rugs. So tonight we're going to look at Polly's style. It is really so classic, primitive, classic. You'll see. And if you might already recognize the name, and I would not be surprised if there are people in this thread who are logged on who have taken classes with Polly or met her over the years. So if that's you, make sure that if you can, you chime in and send us any kind of thoughts you have or recollections or memories, because I'd love to know more about her personally. She seems like a wonderful, wonderful person. Juliet, great to see you. Happy summertime in Maryland. Penny, great to see you. Penny, I loved Who Will Bell the Cat. That was a beautiful piece that you posted today. That was just gorgeous. All right, one little sip and then we'll get going. This isn't me being a sloppy drunk, by the way. Thank you very much to the person who wrote that to me this week. This is me having my Friday night cocktail, which I do on Friday nights. So, Polly Minick. Now, just to let you know, in case you do watch a lot of ribbon candy hooking videos, way back when, like in January, February of 2020, I did a book review. I'm not sure if it was this book or one of Polly's other books, because like I say, I have them all. I have at least 4/5 of them with the Book of Days. And because I was brand new to it, the video was reversed. So I just want to let you know, if you have watched that video in the past, but it was irritating that it was reversed, I did not have the app yet, nor had I figured out that there was such a thing, number one, as an app, and number two, the kind of app that could flip your video. So the video is now flipped, and you're looking at it right side on, which I think is more helpful. So just to let you know, if you love Polly Minick and the look of her work and you want to know more, at the end of this video, that video is still available on Ribbon Candy Hooking, and it's been reversed and corrected. So I feel a lot better about that. Oh, sure, Penny. So, I did a slideshow last week. I'm going to start by looking at this book. I'll come back to you throughout the show, American Summer. And this tied very closely to our patriotic episodes this past week. A lot of red, white, and blue. A lot of old-timey charm. Wait till you see. It's such good stuff. So I took quite a few pictures inside the book because us working together this way has been the best, I think. I started out with a picture of Polly Minick that's in, I think, this book, and I think it's just charming. That really looks like Nantucket to me in the background, maybe Newburyport, but probably Nantucket. She has a strong link to Nantucket. A lot of her work reflects like the culture and the history of the island. I just thought this was just a gorgeous picture of her. She looks like such a kind, really sweet, helpful, nice person. Somebody that is very approachable, right? You know, I put this picture in, it's not a rug, but in her books, routinely, she has got some of the loveliest vignettes. And I know it's like, vignettes are not, don't move everybody the same way, but for me, when I look at a book and there are all kinds of little pictures like this, I get so excited. Just looking at what is there to accompany the projects, because how many projects can you have in one book? When I open up her book and I start to see, I mean, it's just charming collages, this kind of thing, right? You feel so summery. It's really, really cheerful. And her projects, I'm going to be doing most of this in the slideshow. This book really focuses on old time summers, right? American summers, classic sort of vacation stuff with a really historic bent. So we're looking at like all of these kinds of old time, you know, the terrible old jersey knit, scratchy bathing suits that you see in museum exhibits now that are really like, did somebody wear that into the water and then come out smelling like a wet skunk? But indeed they did. So lots of projects in this book, lots of lovely vignettes. And at the beginning of the book, there's an about the author section where I did pull that picture from this book. And she talks about she began hooking rugs in the 1970s. And it says, by hook or crook, she was determined to accomplish the feat. Being an avid antique collector, she wanted a couple of rugs to go with her collections. Now, that's a great reason to make rugs, isn't it? Because sometimes beginners will say, well, what do you do with your rugs? And I mean, it really depends on the person, doesn't it? Because some people are purely utilitarian and they want rugs for the floor, and that's what they're doing, learning rugs. Learning how to make different kinds of rag rugs. And other people are more like, I see this as a textile art, and I want to make lovely things that will always be on the wall, safely on the wall. And they're both great answers, and a mix of those two things is perfect. It makes room for more rugs. But then there are people who have really specific intentions, like I have a quilt, and I have a quilt on the bed, and I would like the rug to match it exactly, or I would like something over the bed head that matches my quilt exactly. And in Polly's case, she has lots of collections. She's an avid antique collector, and she wanted things that would create lovely vignettes with the antiques that she already collected. That's a very good reason, because when you think about it and you create little, if you're a little bit of a magpie too, you've got little vignettes going all over the place, and sometimes you're trying to figure out what to drape behind or what to put underneath to set them all up. A rug is a really perfect thing, especially if you have collections of old stuff or anything that even teeters on folk art. A rug or a quilt is just a perfect thing to have in the background. So her reason for wanting to get started was very specific, and when she got going, she really got going. So there's a nice bio about her that's like a whole page, and it talks about very specifically something we talk about often. Polly's a primitive rug hooker, and like many other primitive rug hookers, she draws inspiration from what is around her. That really is a distinction, isn't it? Because we talk about primitive rug making and design a lot versus filling in commercial patterns. Not that one is ever better than the other, of course. But people who do primitive tend to, like the original folk artists, like the original makers, right, of the 19th century rug makers, you do tend to, when you work in the style, look around, see what grabs you, what catches your eye, compose something very simple, and evolve it into a rug, strip by strip, or yarn, yarn by yarn skein. But it is a good approach, and this is the way that a lot of people who work in a primitive style like to work, very organically, what they feel at that moment, putting things in that don't necessarily fit, putting things in that aren't necessarily the right size. It all works for folk art and for primitive rug hooking, right? Because it's all the same look. So she talks about patriotism in her family, which is very nice. The Marine Fund, which she talks about at the end of this book, a labor of love, something very dear to her heart. But she's kind of setting up in the beginning about what this specific book is going to be, because we know that the theme is American Summers. American Summer celebrates the Americans' love affair with vacations by the shore. That's so specific, isn't it? But it's, for so many people, and I'm a New Englander, Life on the coast, you know, I'm not a beach person. You will just not find me ever laying on a blanket, being still, hoping to get a suntan. I've never done that in my life. But often down at the beach, that inner Pisces in me that always wants to be in the water, even when it's horrifically and dangerously cold. So there is that thing, there is that kind of lore, that history of people wanting to be by the ocean. And we know originally, if we remember our history, we know originally it is because during the American Industrial Revolution, I'm not going to go heavy on history today because we did this week, but during the American Industrial Revolution, we had all of these new barons of industry who were just unthinkably wealthy. Like the wealth was something that we had just not seen before, not even among royal families. This was something different. This was something new. This was something distinctly American. All of these new industries popped up, and of course, with them popped up city centers that became truly filthy. Like the air was filthy, the ground was filthy, dirt, smog, smoke. And, you know, every time someone feels sick or gets sick more often than they used to back in the good old days, they're thinking, well, it's got to be this atmosphere. The environment is terrible for one's health. And sure enough, they figured this out quickly, and doctors were very soon, as soon as city centers became as densely populated and as truly filthy as they did, railroads coming through, all kinds of new transportation coming through, right? The advent of the car a little bit later. Doctors were constantly urging people, if they could afford to, as often as possible, to make trips to the seashore. And it's always interesting to think about those early vacation days, because until we hit the American Industrial Revolution at the end of the 19th century, in that period that we call the Gilded Age, when there was so much wealth, until we hit that period, there really was no such thing as a vacation. That was the advent of the vacation, because if you think about it, right until that point, people were consumed with work, and most people's jobs were 6-day-a-week jobs, six. And on Sunday, you were definitely expected to be in church, not for a 1-hour service, for the whole day. And if you weren't, depending on what community you were from, that could be a real problem. That could be very dangerous for you. So that accounted for all 7 of your days, right? It wasn't until the American Industrial Revolution that people had the kind of money, and we saw a real definite lower class, sadly, working class, upper middle class, and very wealthy class that we didn't even have a name for at the time. But everybody who could afford to, for their health, right? Forget about society and meeting people and your precious name, you know, among your class. But just for health, people would try to get to the seashore as often as possible, because they understood that that air was fresh, and the breezes and the salt and all of the cleansing properties of being near the ocean and in the ocean meant a lot to people's health. And as a result, we have the advent of the vacation right around that time. Water was filthy too. That's a good point, Karen. Absolutely filthy, and that is why so many people were drinking alcohol and things that had been fermented, because they were safer. They were controlled substances. They weren't just water, right? Not everybody had access to fresh water. I've probably told this story before, but I think it's such an interesting story. For me, it was something ticked in my head when I heard it. There's a town near us here in Connecticut called Winstead. And it seems like one of those towns that had such, maybe an illustrious past, maybe a little bit illustrious, lots of mills. It seemed like maybe things were good at one point, maybe in the late 19th, early 20th century, maybe even a little later into the 20th century, but not now. It's not looking good. There are these beautiful old mills that are along this small river, absolutely quaint, adorable, small town with a beautiful big main street. Almost every store is an antique store. Whether or not it's open is a different thing. Old movie theater right on the main street. Beautiful diner right on the main street. Marble top, you know, like an Airstream, like permanently parked inside an alleyway on the main street. It's a beautiful town. And one of the first times I went to the town, I noticed a lot of people with like a car caravan. There's a lake there called Highlands Lake. And it's way up high, like altitude-wise, it's way up a series of hills. I'm really not supposed to park there, but I always do. And it's a beautiful lake that is kind of like Brigadoon, in that there's always seems to be space for us, even though it's tiny. There's never a ton of people there, and the water is so warm. So I go just right in there like it's the Carolinas, Courtney. Like I just right in without any hesitation or complaining. But right outside where you see Highland Lake, there was always this row of cars, and I didn't know what they were there for. Of course, my suspicious mind is thinking, is it drugs? Because it's that kind of town too. But I figured out through constant observation and surveillance from my blanket that there's a natural spring next to this giant bush. You can hardly see it, but the people who live in that town know that it's there. So I walked over with some empty water bottles, and this water is just pumping out of the ground like a crazy fountain. And it is ice cold. And it is the best tasting water I have ever tasted. You just want to you want to gorge on it. You want to just like blimp out, fill up everything that you've got. And now I'm smart enough that when I go there, I bring all kinds of containers like other people are doing. That's why there's always a line because that spring is there. But that, of course, is not the situation for most towns. After I discovered that, let me take a quick swig and then we'll get into the commentary. Care in the mountains too, that's right. Wherever there was good healthful, they said healthful in those days, water to drink. When I discovered that spring, I mean, I didn't discover it, right? But I mean, I finally figured out what it was. I started talking to this guy in a parking lot. He was an old timer. And I don't know why I got chatting, but I always do. And he said that his grandfather or maybe great grandfather was the person. He was an Italian, a full Italian, spoke Italian, was the first person who noticed that that water was there and tapped into it. And ever since it has been spewing water, right? And he said that his grandfather or great grandfather in the 1920s, it was really like 1920, 1921, he wanted to start bottling the water. I probably told this story and selling it. And everybody in town said to him, "What are you, nuts? Who is ever going to pay for water?" But now it's like that's the culture, isn't it? I mean, we have terrible water here where we are at Bethany, where I have the studio, constantly buying bottled water. I always have a 40-pack of it in the car. But it just goes to show how much times have changed and how valuable it was in past days to be able to do the best that you could for yourself with a lack of funds, a lack of medical everything, to do the best you could with yourself. Get your body out to the water, get in the water, try to heal whatever's going on with your skin, whatever's going on the inside. Why not? Why not give it a shot and do the best you can? So people were, oh, hello, Doreen. People were going in great numbers to seashore towns, all kinds of people. Not just wealthy people, all kinds of people. Because if you lived nearby and you could take even one day off a summer, which many families did, just one day in the summer, right, Mom? That's what Graham did, and go out to the amusement park or somewhere special for that one day. And of course, other people had a second home that they lived in for 6 weeks of the year and spent $10 million on. There's always those huge, huge, unfair sort of gaps, right? I'm just reading the comments. Karen says, we have amazing well water in Black Forest at 7,300 feet. That sounds extraordinary. That reminds me of that great movie, Mr. Blandings Builds His Dream House, where he's drilling and drilling and drilling through rock, hoping to find water. It's just not there. I never thought I would be buying a TV. Isn't that funny, Doreen? It's funny how things change and how quickly they change as things go. It's like that saying that people always say, the days go by so slow in terms of hours, particularly when you're doing something that's not very nice, but the years go by so fast. It's scary. You got to hold on as tight as you can, right? So this book celebrates that idea of the great American summer. Of course, it's not something that Americans own, and we can't possibly hijack it from the rest of the world. People have always gone to the shore and enjoyed waters for health reasons, for tourist reasons, just for catching your breath reasons. And this book celebrates that whole moment. Gail, great to see you in Australia, waking up in Australia. So there's a lot of text in this book that is really charming, that sets you up for this moment in time. Very old-fashioned summer images we're getting in this book. And she talks about not only lure and the charm, there's plenty of charm in here, but also basics that are very important, making this a very good beginner's book. So I'm not going to go into this part of it, but Polly talks about in great detail, and just as a note, and I think this is interesting, Polly is one of the many hookers who does not use a frame and never uses a frame, has always used a hoop, like a quilt hoop, embroidery hoop, just a round hoop with no lap to it, no second stage to it. So I think that's interesting to note because we all work differently. She makes the statement in this book that probably 95% of hookers do have a rug hooking frame, but not everybody. And it might not be your thing. And if you're a beginner and you're looking at the prices for frames, that reminds me I have to go pick up frames. I was supposed to go this week. I'm going to be stocking frames in the Ribbon Candy hooking store that I think are perfect for beginners or for people who just need another reliable frame around. But she's making the point, whereas most people do prefer to use a frame, not everybody does. And it's never a good idea to buy a bunch of junk at the beginning of a hobby, because you might find that because you spent all that money, you already have a bad taste in your mouth and you hate the hobby already. So don't set yourself up like that. Try simple things first, try obvious things first, and evolve it as you go. Step up to the bigger things, because you might find that, like Polly Minick, you never want to buy a rug hooking frame, and you love that hoop and you do not want to part with that hoop. So just see how it goes. She makes that point in different language many times in this book, and I really appreciate that point. So she talks about frames and hoops and hooks and cutters. She talks about how, whereas her sister is a great quilter, she is not a quilter. And she does rug hooking all the time. So she has a nice beeline cutter. But she says, you know, rotary cutters also work. Scissors also work. Anything that cuts works. Even if you can just snip your wool, if you're okay with cutting with a wider cut, snip it, rip it, just like old timers did, right, back in the day, that works too, right? All of those things still work. She talks about interesting things like lighting, how important it is to get that right, rug backing, the different backings that you might use, the bindings that you might use. She talks about using cotton, you know, whereas many people use like a bias tape looking thing, or like a duck or canvas kind of a cotton thick with a diagonal twill to it. A lot of people use that to bind, turn behind the rug and finish them. She often uses quilt material, right? Because she, although she is not a quilter herself, she does a lot with quilting material, like in this picture. And what a great accent it is, even if it's peeking out from around the sides, to use a complementary or contrasting quilt material. It can really pop your piece. So that's her way of working. And she works with transferring with red dot. We sometimes talk about that. I'm not going to talk about transfers tonight because it's a cozy night for us. We don't do a lot of technical talk on Fridays. But all of this stuff is included in the text of the book. It's very, very helpful. She talks about hooking the rug, finishing the rug, assigning your rug, so important, blocking your rug, 500 and foot deep well. That sounds extraordinarily deep. That really sounds like hope Billy's not stuck in the well and Lassie has to come kind of a depth to a well. Signing your rug, and she has a whole section that says try before you buy. Don't set yourself up for disaster. Don't buy a bunch of stuff that you can't use. It's so heartbreaking on these threads on Facebook to hear people saying, uh-oh, I bought this much of the wrong monk's cloth. It just makes you feel so sorry for them, because you know how frustrating it is. Whether you can afford to or not, it's super frustrating to have all the wrong supplies around you. You feel like you start having those crazy illogical thoughts like maybe this is not meant to be, right? Talking yourself out of it. And then she talks about a section that's called timid to jump into the dye pot. In other words, you're thinking that maybe it's not your thing? And she talks about how she was definitely timid about getting going with dyeing, thinking about all the messy aspects of it, all the expense of it. And she said she fought against it for a long time, but the more she got going with her hooking, the more she realized it was central and important to her to be able to achieve certain colors. And she wanted to be really able to control that part of it too, and she did get involved with dyeing. So she does talk about marrying dye, leaching dye. She talks about different, very simple and accessible dye techniques. And she talks about other interesting things. It's a real potpourri, this book, right? It's a real patchwork of ideas and thoughts. She has tips like memory wool. And memory wool, of course, I know you know this, but if you're a beginner, memory wool refers to, and also cotton if you're a quilter, any material, not just wool. But for example, I have the things that my dad wore, you know, before he passed away. I have all his sweaters and ties and his Thanksgiving pants and all of those horrific fashion choices. But I have all that stuff, and I haven't used it yet. I have it in my head, everything has to be perfect, right? And I want to create projects I can divide up between sisters and mom, and but that is memory wool or memory material. Anything that's very special to you, from a special person, from a special memory, from a trip, from something you once wore, from a wedding dress, something special that makes sense for you to, you know, I don't want to say chop it up, but break it up in such a way that you can make use of it and enjoy it every day. That sounds better than chop it up, doesn't it? So that's what memory wool or any kind of memory fabric is all about. She talks about some other interesting things in this book that I really have not seen anyone else cover. So for example, let me turn off this little vignette And she has a whole section talking about hooking the same pattern in different colors. Now, Judy Taylor does do this. She'll show you the same thing hooked in many different ways. But this is interesting because when Polly does this, and she does this often with her patterns, she's actually hooking the same pattern with the same color palette twice, but the color placement is different. So we're not talking about an Andy Warhol job where each one is completely its own color palette and distinct. No, we're talking about using the same color palette but placing the colors differently. And that is something different. And on this page, she's showing you examples of this throughout the book. She shows you many examples of this. But I just thought it was one extra thing that she offers for food for thought that could be interesting for you. And she's really making the point, because it's not helping you choose colors, it's the same color palette for both. But she is making the point that when you have your fabrics out and you're thinking, I'm so angry at myself because I started working on a project while I was at my mom's the last couple of days, hooking with yarn. It's the 3-ply Briggs and Little yarn that I buy and dye and sell. And the yarn is also available for this Monet set behind me. I promise I'll do that right after the show. But I started hooking a beautiful project that is based on antique quilt squares, real ones from 19th century quilts. And I chose 9 of my all-time favorite blocks from different quilts from that period. And I'm putting together a beginner class because a bunch of people have asked for this, and I do want to do it, hooking with yarn. And it's going to be, I'm hooking 9 quilt squares that come out looking like a Baltimore album, all hooked with yarn. But I'm going to make it much smaller. It's going to be 4, and everybody's going to be able to choose which 4 they want. And you have to trust me that I promise I will put them together, the 4 in the best configuration. Because I've got like a lovely woman side saddle on a horse, not even the saddle, just, riding bareback on a horse, lovely sort of Georgian woman. A bunch of different kinds of cornucopias or flower baskets, vases, things like that. A moon, a crescent moon with some stars, like some different ones. I've got 9 very different things in mind. So that's coming up, and I started that, and I wanted to show it to you. But in the case of that, for each square that I look at each compartment differently, and I think, ooh, how about some peach and Tiffany blue this time? And then for the next one, I think, ooh, how about some antique black and some crazy fuchsia eyelash yarn? Because this class will also include lots of wild fibers. If you saw all the crazy fibers I put out as a set, lots of different fibers. So not just wool, and we'll talk about blocking before you start adding in crazy fibers on top, but hooking with all kinds of yarn, from very thin sock yarn that you want to double or quadruple up to hook with, not punching, hooking, or all these kinds of novelty yarns, the fun furs and all that stuff that is really wacky and can add a lot to your piece. Thanks, Jennifer. Good to see you. It's really pretty. I really like this piece. I'm only on the 3rd square now. Luckily, those Midsummer Murders are so good. I just watch them and hook in the evening while the kids are busy with building Lego sets, which is very nice. It's a nice combo. So the thing about color, right, it's different from piece to piece, and it really depends on what you're working on. Let me come back one more second. Thanks, Doreen. I think it will be great. It's not my typical, but I think it'll be fun, and I think it'll answer every question about hooking with yarn. After doing a class like this, it'll be like maybe a 2-hour class, and we'll do a little bit of each kind of thing so that we will have covered all these questions about, well, what if it's too thin? Well, what if it's acrylic? What if it's pulling? What if it's not staying? What if it's not looping as high as the pieces around it? We'll cover all of that stuff in one go, and then people will have the freedom, because I'm going to put a stupid amount of yarn into each kit. And people will be sort of at liberty later when they have time to think, not be working on a class, to think about in each compartment how they want to break the colors down. So conversations about colors are helpful and welcome in any book, I think. Polly's book really covers the subject really well. She also talks about just hanging them with like a skirt hanger or however you might want to hang them, and repairing rugs, just a little bit on repairing, color variations. Tips like don't cut all your wool at one time. That's not what she does. It does get raggle-taggle gypsy, right, when you cut it all at once and you keep it in a bag, and then you forget to work on it for 5 years, and it's all kind of matted up pig's breakfast style, and it's not as nice and sleek as it was when you cut it. So nice tips like that. How much wool do you need? Developing your own style, which certainly she has. doing different borders. She loves a good border on her work. So all this stuff is extremely helpful. Tips on borders and simple things that we don't always talk about. Enlarging designs. I always say go to Staples and let them deal with it. But it's nice to have it written out for you. So if you are truly a beginner and you're thinking, I'm going to do this, I'm going to take it to Staples, but what do I say when I get there? It's so easy to trip ourselves up, isn't it, with everything. Sometimes you feel like if you have no familiarity with this craft, you don't even know what the language is. You don't even know what the right words to say are, right? And all of this can be off-putting. So it's good to have tips on every aspect of starting rug hooking. And it's certainly what she does. Tips for success is another section. Lots and lots of pictures. And then she has a chapter that's called Read This Before You Start a Rug. And it's just reminding you, now hold on, think about, one more time, think about this. Do not run in like bull in China shop style and mess it up at the beginning, right? Just one more time. Let's talk about this, work through it, think about it, and then let's go. So keeping the excitement going, but stopping you from going in a little bit too Mardi Gras style. Cutting, materials, finishing the rug, and then it starts in on the projects. Not very far into the book, 22 pages into the book, she starts in on what the projects are, and these projects are so beautiful. I'm only going to show you a few of them because I don't want to spoil the book for you if you end up getting it. I know a lot of people have it already. This book, I should have said already, I'm just bringing you to the first project here. Hang on, right here. Oops, wait a minute, sorry. Okay, I got all kinds of stuff going on right here. Wait a minute. There we go. Barn quilt images. Yeah, very similar, Karen, to barn quilt images for this Baltimore thing that I'm working on. Very similar. Sometimes the barn quilt images are super, super simple, but also very recognizable blocks like flying geese or Dresden plate, that kind of thing. But these are more like Baltimore, like they're based on applique rather than pieced blocks. And I think with barn quilts, more often than not, they're based on pieced blocks, like actual patchwork. So a little bit different, but definitely the same feel, without a doubt the same feel. Luckily with rug hooking, unlike with quilting, you're not sewing lines, whether it be on the machine or by hand. You're doing it loop by loop. And in that regard, I think we have a much easier time with some of our projects that have a lot of lines and complications because you can pull one loop up and make an eyeball and you're done, or cut your strand in half and do a couple of eyelashes, and just that little glint in the eye is enough to say everything that you need to say. A little color in the cheek, just a couple of little loops is enough that everything that you need to say is in one or two loops. So we approach it so much differently, and I think it has, for me, a lot more flexibility than quilting, which I also love. Completely different products, right? Both fun, and luckily we don't have to choose between them. So this is the first, I had mixed feelings when I was looking through this book because of all the stuff that happened on the 4th of July, Highland Falls, holy mackerel. But this book was written in, let me pull up the year. I hate thinking about stuff like that because it detours me. 2012, detoured everybody, I know. 2012, 4th of July parade. And this is the image. And I want to point out, this is my hand holding the book open for you. There's that cute, she's got a little Airedale that appears in a lot of her work. And that's the Airedale being pulled by her sons in a wagon, 4th of July parade, done in a very nostalgic style, right? It looks even earlier than it would be for the storyline of her family. But I think it's a beautiful rug, and she says, this 4th of July rug was lots of fun to plan and hook. I designed this rug with our sons in mind. They were always known as the Minnick boys. I remembered all the parades we attended. Now the boys go with their children, so this was fitting for our family. We have always had an Airedale, so it was easy to add their current pal in the wagon. Go ahead and personalize this pattern a bit to match your family. Isn't it nice that she says that instead of this is my drawing, who dares change it? She just seems like such a nice person. She gives the measurement, if you can see on the bottom left in this circle, it says 24 by 54. So she will tell you during the course of making this project. I think she might have, let me see if I used a second image for this particular projet. Let's see, scrolling back here. Yep, a close-up. So this is another page that she shows where she's showing you kind of One of her many inspirations is kind of Boy Scout themed, very Norman Rockwell looking. It's not a Rockwell, but looking illustration. Boy Scout heavy with carrying the flags, and somebody's little sister tagged along, right? Nobody wants little sister there, but they've got their paper hats on, like their boat hats on, and their flags, and the dog is with them, the little hunting dog, the little pointer. Inspiration for the design that she did, and then she shows you the design. And she actually says with all of her patterns to make this rug, enlarge this pattern 550%. So if you took this to Staples, you would say, plug it into the machine, which I always struggle with, or give it to the person and say, times 550. So that's very, very helpful because you know that that equals 24 by 54. So she's very, very helpful with setting you up for success. That is the first project that's in this book. The second one is the same kind of feel. I'm sure you're already getting that impression that most of her work evokes this old-time summer, right? All these old-time bathing suits. Beach Gal this time I think is super, super charming. A woman in a nice old bathing suit. There's one before that's called Bathing Beauties. I'm skipping a lot of them so that when you get this book, you'll have lots to look at. But I thought this one was so adorable, Beach Gal. And she's showing you that metal, you know, I don't even know what that is. It might be a noisemaker or something. It could be some kind of a shovel thing. But that's where she got the idea from, right? On the right-hand page, that's where she gets the idea from, is this little tin toy, probably Ohio Arts or something like that. And she did a very similar design, different colors completely, a bit more of the red, white, and blue, which is her wheelhouse, her comfort zone. She really stays in her lane with color. She loves, for primitive, she stays primitive and she stays red, white, and blue. Sometimes a little bit of pink, but she rarely leaves that particular palette. So she took out the yellow and the tomato red, and she did it more in her colors, but another really beautiful piece. Let me see, I feel like I might have put that one. Yeah, I put that one in the wrong place. This is another bathing one. This is called Bathing Beauties. She has a few that are called Bathing Beauties, and they're each a little bit different. Some have more than 2 characters in them. This is the personalizing it, right, making it a different size as well. But just super, super charming, right? Beach pail in the background, old-time suits, very simple, very primitive. Would be quite easy to hook. This is a nice walk into it the same way that the 4th of July parade was. The flag that's kind of tapered like a pennant at the end, flapping in the wind. And in this picture, she's got 4 girls as opposed to the image before where she's showing 2. So of course you would personalize it, customize it. If you have some beautiful old family photos that have some of your family members in these old-time bathing suits, that would be a great opportunity to switch it out and do some personalization. You see this adorable beach shovel on this one too, right? The tin beach shovel. But you can expect to find this in every project chapter. She shows you exactly how to do it, what number to blow it up to get exactly the same result that she's got. I liked this vignette as well, the swimsuit rug. It's on the wall right there on the right, but in the background you can see her place, which is always nice to take a peek. Do you see how in the background she's got that sort of collection of those little carved fishermen, right? Like the sort of Cape Ann style fishermen. And down below, I'm looking at the shelves of her house. That's a bit creepy. But I can see she's got a bunch of the Sailor's Valentine style picture frames that are surrounded with shells, like real souvenir stuff. She's got some what look like cast iron, either ice cream molds or chocolate molds, and some cast iron door stops with clipper ships and lighthouses. And on the ceiling, look at all those beautiful early baskets. Super charming, super charming. So this is hanging there. This might even be like a shop corner or something like that. Maybe it's a shop corner. I see a tag on top. But this beautifuful piece that says Nantucket underneath it with this old-time bathing suit. Very simple design. Really evokes the past. And again, this is the kind of information that you can expect. It's complete. Lots of nice vignettes. This classic rainbow fleet. We've seen this image before because Erica Wilson, the famous in the 1970s, 1980s British needlepoint artist, did a lot with this famous rainbow fleet off of Nantucket. It was a famous postcard. I showed it in one of the coffee times. It was a series, actually. But all of this stuff being featured in this book, too, because we've got a nautical theme, and why not? This is a great one, too, the Moby Dick. 20 by 42, the finished rug, she says, you cannot spend time on Nantucket and not be aware of Moby Dick and the whaling industry that existed on the island. I decided I needed a whale for my show. Why not Moby Dick? This fairly simple yet charming rug soon became a big hit at my shows. You know, and it really is. It's all of those things. It's got that big fat sperm whale that Ahab was tormented by. It's got all that lore, all that Herman Melville lore, whatever you remember from that long, dense book, right? That was not such a joy to read in modern times as I think some other books. It's just very, very thick and dense. But beautiful story, very recognizable image. Nantucket in the background here. Of course, this is based on a real story, and I know I've said this before, but if you're interested in whaling and you're interested in Nantucket and the story of Moby Dick, you want to get Nathaniel Philbrick's book called The Tragedy of the Whale Ship Essex. I think that's what it's called. Something about the whale ship Essex. But it really is about going after a whale who seems to take a personal interest in wrecking the ship and everybody on it and everything that befalls the crew after that absolute tragedy, being lost at sea and floating around and resorting to cannibalism. So be aware that that's in there because it's a very dense and descriptive book. But interesting moment in time, and if you're interested in whaling history, you probably already know about that book. This is a bit more benign. This is a quite happy-looking whale, but just another great example of how primitive rug hooking at its best, in my opinion. Being able to tackle all these different subjects, these all being nautical, but still having this crazy kind of diversity from one rug to the next. Let me see if I did anything else. You know, I put some more of the Beach Gal. So I put those out of order. I'm sorry about that. We saw this one a little bit earlier, this one just called Beach Gal. Members that copied from the shovel or whatever on the yellow float. Just a really charming, very patriotic piece. But, you know, I say patriotic, but it's good all summer long, isn't it? The drawings are very good in this book, too. And notice in this image, she is again showing you the same rug twice, same color palette twice, but minor color variations do make for a different looking rug. I bet we all have different feelings about what we like more. There's a pale in the bottom of the second one, not in the top one. In the top, it's a red head. The flag is handled a little bit differently, and so is the water. Are you okay, Jay?
Yeah.
Okay. Borders handled differently. Very different compositions, but slightly different shifts in color, right? And I couldn't resist putting some of this in here. I mean, my God, this book is just filled with vignettes, and I just go crazy for vignettes. It's one of my favorite words. So things like this, where she's got these little asides where you can look at a nice beach pail like this and little pond boat kind of a thing. She's got beautiful, beautiful photography in here that really supports the mood of the book. This is a faded flag that she did as a hooked rug. She does a lot of faded flags, and they are so impossibly charming. They really capture the look of a very, very, very old flag. I particularly liked this one because I recognize the windmill as being in Chatham, Cape Cod, in what's it called, Mom, where they have the art festival every summer. It might be called Windmill Park, actually. I think Chase Park. It's called Chase Park. They have a labyrinth now behind this windmill. I recognize it exactly. I know that's exactly where that is. And we have generations of photos right here where she hung this flag on this very fence. So that really spoke to me. But I wanted to show this one because I showed this last week during our 4th of July sort of blockbuster week of looking at patriotic themes. I showed this rug that's called The Pledge, and I said at the time, I'm pretty sure that this is a Polly Minick. It absolutely is a Polly Minick because it's in this book. Slightly different colors. She does it a few times, but this is absolutely a Polly Minick book. So I wanted to come back to you on that. Rosie the Riveter on the Sea. You know what, Karen? That did look like Rosie the Riveter, that beach gal, right? That's a really good, that's a great comment because that's also the same look. That's a different face of patriotism, isn't it? But that's very recognizable, and using that kind of an image, even with a beach scene, right, mellows it out a little bit, but it gives you the same kind of impression. It's the same kind of iconography that we've been looking at for years that tries to evoke, summon patriotism. And we need it the most when we're feeling the least patriotic, looking at those kinds of images. So that would work interchangeably and beautifully. Again, this is The Pledge. Now, I also noticed while I was digging around for Polly Minick that she wrote this book. The Sand Pail Encyclopedia, a complete value guide for tin litho sand toys by Karen, help me out, Horam and Polly Minick. And I did not know that. I think I actually have this book. I have, I think, every book on collecting sand pails that there is. But those letters are beautiful, Doreen. They were beautifully hooked. I just thought this was interesting for you because if this is really inspiring you, the Polly Minick rugs, like her body of work, then you might want to, if you want to design like her or be inspired in the same way that she is, this is probably a book for you because this is going to be a full encyclopedia of color images of sand pails. And you can see that she often pulls from sand pails and tin beach collectors art, Ohio Art in particular, the company that made them. She pulls on that often for her designs. So it might be that if you were to get this book, you would be likewise really inspired, right? I happened to, when I looked that up, I went on eBay and I went and I looked at some of the, let me get my paper out here because I did some write-ins for you here. This stuff is on eBay right now. I started thinking, wow, what kind of images are there on shovels and pails? I kind of know because I have those books already. But I thought for the purpose of the show, like, for example, this one's on eBay right now. It's $28 plus $10 for shipping. It's being sold by a seller called Keepers Dash or hyphen Best. And it's called Vintage Children's Tin Metal Sand Beach Sandbox Toy Shovel with Dog Pail. So that's a mouthful. But it's absolutely beautiful image, right? Let me bring it in a little bit closer up for you. You can see having this in a composition, right? This would be a great thing, a great old litho to pull from. Copyright-wise, I'm not sure. It would really depend on the artist, whether they were credited to the artist or whether the people who created the graphics for these companies, I don't know if this is in Ohio off the top of my head, but sometimes artists were hired to just work on pictures all day, and they would be paid by the hour or yearly salary, and that's what they got. And they are not linked to the authorship or they're not credited for having done an image, right? Because it just belonged, for example, to the company they worked for, let's say as a placeholder, Ohio Art. So in many cases, we're seeing art from this period. The person's been paid. They're perfectly happy with what they got paid for. They went on with their life. They got a house in the suburbs. They're good. And their art belonged to whatever company they worked for. And if that company has been closed for X amount of time, depending on the status of that company, that will determine whether that image is under copyright. But for your purposes, right, if you're looking to be inspired, adorable image of a fish, like the dog has accidentally, I think, caught a fish in a sand bucket or pail, and look at how surprised his little face looks when the fish jumps out. Images like this are all over this sort of early 20th century, mid 20th century tin beach art. And this is obviously one of Polly's great inspirations. This bucket is currently on there too, this eagle bucket. It's called Vintage Ohio Art Red Tin Metal Metallic Sand Pail Patriotic Eagle Americana. $20 plus $10.90 shipping. Seller is Tis the Season and Stuff, spelled right out. So another beautiful pail that would work great for making an image, being inspired. This is an adorable vintage Ohio art tin litho sand pail, boys and girls having a picnic on the beach. The seller is Cub, K-U-B, _ 1575. And this one costs $31 with $13 shipping. But you can see how lovely these images are and how inspiring it would be if you're looking to design, if you're looking to design something along the lines of the American beach holiday or summer vacation. These are great sources to pull from. This is another Ohio Art 6-inch vintage 1960s, 70s fish and seahorses tin litho pail, $25, $10 shipping, sold by the number 6 canoes. So just thought I would put that in there in case that was interesting to you. Do I have maybe one more? Yeah, I have one more, the seahorse. Sadly, I did not write. No, that was, I just gave you, the information I just gave you for 6 canoes is actually for the seahorse. The one right before this was a fish and seahorses. That was also Ohio Art, 6 inches, tall tin sand pail, shovel, fish and seahorses, $22.50 plus 14 shipping, Blue Vista. But hey, if you type in vintage sand bucket or pail, these will all come up. They're not infinite, right? There's only 2 or 3 pages of them. Carrie says, is I love an old sand pail like these. Me too. You know, and also, if you love this, Carrie, you probably also already know that you love the holiday stuff. If you're into the holidays, you celebrate Christmas or at least wintertime and snowmen and stuff. These manufacturers of tin toys did a lot with the holiday, the winter season too. They weren't just a summer industry. And you get some beautiful images that really are like coloring book type images on the holiday stuff that came out. So twice a year, you got two different pops where you got a whole wave of images that were so quaint, just impossibly quaint and beautiful, and would really lend themselves so well to rug hooking, don't you think, design-wise? So let's see, let me come back to here. And I think we're going to, okay, so what I want to share with you now is I found this wonderful blog called Hooked on the Lake, right? You're probably already familiar with Hooked on the Lake. Just going to take a swig for a second. This is the rug that I used by Polly Minick for the thumbnail for today's video. I found this great blog, Hooked on the Lake. It came out February 7th, 2014. And the title of it is Polly Minick. So this blog by Hooked on the Lake included quite a few photographs that I pulled several of them to show you tonight. And again, you know that this is February 7th, 2014. The blog is by Hooked on the Lake. You could read the whole thing and look at all the images in great detail on your computer. I want to share some of them tonight. The text read, "My lucky friend Sandy, who's spending some time in Florida, took a class last year with teacher Polly Minick. Polly has been designing rugs, wool, and teaching and hooking for many years and has written a number of books. I'm lucky enough, I'm going to come back to you for a minute. I'm lucky enough to have a few of the ones she wrote or co-authored with her sister Lori Simpson, who is a quilter. Sandy went to a trunk show / lecture by Polly last week and took these pics, and I thought I would share them with you as they are lovely. Some of the rugs have a definite, what I consider, Nantucket feel to them. Beachy, soft tones with a vintage look. Absolutely, right? That was said much more eloquently than I said it. Or a distinct Americana look. And a very limited blue, cream, red color palette. Color spelled with a U, a British person at work. To read more about Polly and her exploits, check out her blog. This is worth checking out. I don't think it's current, but her blog is called Minnick, and Minnick has one N, M-I-N-I-C-K. Minnick and, full word spelled out, Minnick, A-N-D, Simpson, S-I-M-P-S-O-N, blogspot.ca. So, you know, you can just do Polly Minick or Minnick Simpson blog, and it'll come up with all of the past years that the blog was active and all of the different entries for the different months. Now, they are by far more than 99% about quilting, but once in a while there is a blog entry that involves rug hooking. So if you're interested in both, you will hit the jackpot and find a great rabbit hole. Otherwise, it's just beautiful eye candy for anybody. And they're quite well written too. They're really eloquent and lovely. And she said, years ago when I started hooking, my teacher and mentor, Tony Latham, took a group of us down to Victory Mills, New York, to a rug show put on by Dick LaBarge. Dick is an amazing hooker, teacher, and master dyer. Tony and I were lucky enough to spend the day in the dye kitchen with Dick, the mad professor. Dick had a wild and fun approach to dyeing that totally inspired me, while Gord spent time with Dick's partner, George Conley, K-A-H-N-L-E, playing with the computer. George was an amazing designer of primitive folk art rugs, and he and Dick would teach together at many rug camps. Sadly, last week, George passed away. He will be missed by those whose lives he touched with his wonderful designs and generous spirit. That really is super sad. So that was what the blog read. So let's look at some of the other images that appeared in that blog. Linda says, Minnick and Simpson Blogspot, you're welcome. I was so happy to find it myself because it is super eye candy. It is like, you know, when you know you're going to be on your phone or your computer, it's exactly what you want to have bookmarked. So you can go in there at leisure and really take a look. So let me come back to these images that are all from the Hooked on the Lake blog that I just read. So here's Polly again with another classic of her rugs. You can see there's, I think that's the Moby rug we just saw in the background. That's from the American Summer book. On the left, there's a couple of chickens. We're going to see that one coming up. But beautiful pieces, beautiful pieces. So that is one of the red, white, and blue Patriotics. And you see right behind her in this image is the pledge, right? The Pledge of Allegiance on the hooked flag. So that's what cemented in my mind. That's definitely her rug. And some other lovely images were associated on the wall, the display. The bathing suit one we saw, the 4th of July parade. That one on the bottom left that looks like it could be like a trip around the world kind of a quilt or a postage stamp quilt, that is a hooked rug. That is a rug. We've got a variation on Beach Gal, but with a lighthouse. That one's a definite different one in the middle. And then a kind of weather vane rooster with these soft blue and white stars on the top left. All very good. So this all would have appeared at this event that was mentioned. This is a close-up of the Beach Gal on top of, I don't know if you would even call that a lighthouse, or it's not a buoy. I don't know what the right word for that is. They're all over the place. I really ought to know what that is. This is a nice one. This is, I think, called Whirligig Boy. This is in the American Summer book. I didn't use this one in it because I didn't want to show you every project. I only showed you a fraction of the projects. But I'm pretty sure this one is called Whirligig Boy. In other words, one of those metal whirligigs, inspired by one of those. You can see how, as a collector, she's pulling from the pails, the shovels, the whirligigs, all kinds of sources, right, of Americana folk art. This is a close-up of the chicken rug with the soft blue stars. So simple. All these denim blues, but so effective, and a close-up of the sort of checkerboard rug. What a great floor rug. What a simple thing to hook as well. Oh, this is different. This is different. This is not the same as the Moby rug, but another rug with a great sort of sperm whale in it along the lines of Moby Dick. It's funny, that boat in the foreground, it makes you think, is he meant to be that big, or is that a toy boat in the foreground? Clipper ship kind of thing in the background, and a beautiful lighthouse on the side. These are just so summery. And this one also popped up in that blog. So I don't have a title for it. It was not titled, but I have to say I absolutely love the vintage feel of this. It is meant to look faded, right? When you do your dyeing, if you're dyeing for a project like this, you want to be so careful. A little of the color, some of the hearts at the top are a little bit more potent, but in the main body, the main motif, which is the bouquet with the two flags sticking out, there is some light pink and blue. It's very light, so you want to be really careful. You want to whisper of those colors to get that vintage look, and it does look like an old rug where much of it is faded, but it really is a new rug that's going to last many, many years ahead. This was a nice one too that kind of popped up. I think this one popped up on a site called Quiltmania -inc.us. Polly Minick worked a lot with Quilt Mania, of course, a crossover with her sister in the books that were co-authored. You love that big whale, Carrie. It's very New England. It's super New England, isn't it? It really is. I mean, it's because at one time those whales came right into the shore, and whalers it was a day job to go whaling, but then they overdid it, right? This is like the story of humanity. They overdid it, and they could no longer just spend a day trying to capture a whale that was right offshore. They would be gone for years at a time because the whales took off, right? They overdid it, they overharvested, and then they would be gone for very long voyages around Cape Horn, doing all this really dangerous stuff for years at a time, really life-changing voyages, very dangerous, because they just took too many whales at once. The whales aren't that stupid. So it is interesting how they were, I mean, when the Pilgrims landed, they described the whales as being right there. They could see them from the shore, frolicking. They said they could see them frolicking from the shore. And over the course of a couple generations, that kind of, more than a couple, 100 years, that kind of ended. So over harvesting, we did the same thing with the lobsters, right? There's so many early records in New England of lobsters that were more than 6 feet long. Now that would probably be a disgusting, tough old body to be gnawing at, but there were really large lobsters at one time, and again, over harvested. It's very hard to get them, and you never see them that size because there's so many people looking for them now. Things change, things change. But I think I found this image on Quiltmania, and the reason I came back to you is because I wanted to point out one thing that Quilt Mania published that is Polly Minick. And I have this book, which is very, very cute, very basic, um, published by Quilt Mania Editions. It's a spiral bound book by Polly Minick called Basics of Rug Hooking with a bonus CD. This is good if you are absolutely a beginner. And at the end of it, it does have a DVD. And in the course of it, it's a nice spiral book that lays flat. Similar things to what we were talking about in the Americana summer book, the American Summer. Hoop versus frame, machine cloth cutter versus rotary cutter. Lots of conversations that particularly are good for beginners to read. Red dot, felt markers, wool strips, lighting. So a lot of sort of repetition, right? You would need this book if you just wanted a beginner's book and you thought that the DVD was going to be real helpful for you and you have something to play it on. But so this is a nice, it's in French and English, right? It's page, like the facing page is French language for each one. So I think that's interesting. She talks about storing your wool. She talks about color, developing your color sense. So some of it is similar to the Americana book. If you already have that, you might not need this book. But in this book, she does have different projects because it's a different theme. It's just basic. So Saltbox House is one of them. Very simple color schemes. Let me show you some of the projects in this book in case you are interested in pumpkins. Right, really easy directions here, what you'll need, again in French and English. A teeny pot of flowers. Really, I don't want to say typical. It's primitive stuff, but it's not typical. I think it's much prettier than the average. Single chicken. It's got some feed there, some little kernels or something. But lots of really, really good images. It's worth knowing what's in there. This book is readily available online. I like this one, Primitive Pot of Flowers. Right, so if these really speak to you more than the red, white, and blue of the American Summer, then this might be a very good book for you because this is very affordable on eBay or Amazon or Abe Books. Really nice. I hadn't looked at these yet. Now I can't stop. But these are really, really good designs at the end. Oh gosh. And then ones like this that really fit in with our conversation tonight. See, she's very big on borders. That's why a lot of her teaching is about putting that border on. I hadn't seen this one yet. Isn't that nice? The French flag, the Eiffel Tower. Very simple, very understated, red, white, and blue. And then the whole back of the book from here on is called Great Tips. So that's a lot of great tips in there, right? That's many, at least 30 pages of great tips there. Very nice book. Very nice book with the DVD. So that again is published by Quilt Mania Editions, and it looks like that. So that's very easy to find, and for a beginner, that would be really a jackpot of information. Oh, you've never lived there? We got to come and visit at least. Have you come to visit yet, Carrie, New England? There's so many different places to see, and of course, every state is very different, and every part of every state is very different. I think the variety is huge, even in New England, and definite distinction in the way that southern New England, which is Rhode Island, Massachusetts, Connecticut, very different feeling for me than northern New England, which is Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine. Very different. Still beautiful, and I just never can decide, but very different feeling. So anyway, I found on that site, Quilt Mania, that beautiful image of the spotted horse, right? I thought that was, I couldn't get the quality any better. That was the size on the internet. So I left it at that. I accepted it. Beautiful image of a spot. Is this Palomino, Mom, with the spots? And the lamb's tongue on the side, the occasional star in the lamb's tongue. It's just a lovely folk composition. But Quilt Mania on their website, their blog site, put out a wonderful interview with Polly. So I wanted to read that to you now because hopefully it will bring you to Quilt Mania, the blog site. And they cover Polly from time to time, again, because of the authoring of books with her sister. But I thought this was a very helpful article to have, so I included it in the text for tonight. It says, Polly Minick reveals her helpful tips on rug hooking. First of all, most publications, and all of mine, give you tips on supplies, wool, rug hooking, linen, or monk's cloth, backing, and these kinds of tips can be found on any website or search engine. Because I've been hooking rugs for 40 years, I'd like to share some of my private tips that you do not find in most publications. So number one, try before you buy. Make sure that before you buy anything, be it a cutter, hook, hoop, or frame, make a deal with the seller to let you try it in your hand and use it before you purchase. Now, this can be a tricky one, but if you live near rug hooking stores, they will let you do this, right? Reason, all items work differently for each person. Absolutely. For instance, 99% of the hooking world uses a frame where I've never used a frame. So she goes on to talk about that distinction, and that is so true, isn't it? My hook will feel different in your hand. I've had people in class that are who are struggling with hooking say, "Can I use your hook?" And they like my hook even less. My hook isn't expensive. I've got like a vintage Susan Bates kind of a hook that I use most often, but it just feels right in my hand. It's the one that I go to, and you have yours that you go to. We all find ours that we go to, and price has nothing to do with it, right? So she's saying price doesn't have anything to do with a lot with this craft because this is a thrift craft. So whatever feels right to you, if you're doing it in a way that you like it and it ain't broke, then you don't try to fix it. You don't need to go shopping for craziness if you got stuff that's working already. Her second tip is create your own style. Many start off by buying a kit, and that's a great idea as it is complete and you can get started right away. After you're comfortable with this, you'll want to try your hand at creating your own design. You might want to create your own design. Not everybody does want to, right? Some people are more technical and they like to fill things in exactly the way that the picture shows. Some people enjoy that part of hooking the most. And those people will never want to do a design, and there's nothing wrong with that. If you enjoy the technical part more, you're like, give me my next project. If you are more creative than technical, you say, give me a blank canvas. I'm going to do my own thing and then I'll figure the rest out. It really depends on who you are and what your favorite part is. You want to spend as much time doing your favorite part as possible. Spend the least amount of time with a rug hooking project working on the stuff that you like the least. Figure out how to make that ratio right for you. If you hate big backgrounds, don't be choosing or creating patterns with giant backgrounds where you're like, oh, I feel like I've been working on this sky for 6 months. Don't do that to yourself. Figure out how to not do that to yourself by creating a hit or miss background, patterning, or just a completely different pattern, right? It has to be fun, or why are you doing it, right? She talks about how much wool would I need. She goes more for 4 to 5 times the amount on the space. I usually go, most people say 3. I usually go for 4. She goes to 4 to 5. So you can see there can be, in terms of like if I'm hooking something, isn't it lucky that I picked this up? If I'm hooking something this size, flat, imagine it is a flat shape. I would normally say 4 times this is going to absolutely do it. The rule of thumb is usually 3 to 4 times, but I say at least 4 times. She says 4 to 5 times. So I think that's right on. With kits, I definitely go more toward 4 than 5 because I never know if you are a high hooker and if you're doing loops very, very high. And I don't ever know if you're a packer either, unless I find out that you ran out of something, and then I think you might be a high hooker or a packer. And if you are, it doesn't really matter. I can always send more. I've got more, right? So then she says, number 4 tip is, I say water and hooked rugs do not agree. I often state, be sure to not let your rugs get wet. As the dye from your rug can easily run and ruin your rug, be careful with them. But then I also speak of washing vintage wool and dyeing wool in hot water, so people get confused. That's correct. Before hooked into a rug, you can't wash and dye wool. After hooking, be careful to not get wet, as colors can easily run. So this is maybe a conversation for a different show, because of course I would go along with that with wool, and we know with older rugs, particularly that are on burlap backing, you do not want to get them wet or damp or anything like that, because the backing will disintegrate. But we also know that a lot of people are currently making rugs that are made out of knot wool and t-shirt materials, and maybe they're working on cotton monk's cloth or cotton rug warp, and they've got an all cotton rug, and they're used to popping it in the washing machine and even the dryer. And people are reading these threads on Facebook and saying, I didn't think you could wash rugs. There's a lot to know. It depends, just like with garments, right? It depends on what it's made out of, what the directions are. So it can be very different from rug to rug. But rule of thumb with wool, I think it is a good idea to not get them wet. And she's absolutely right. You know, I always, when I dye wool, I rinse it until the water runs clear. And I do not expect any more color to come off of the wool. It should be absolutely exhausted. All of the dye should be in the wool, and it should all have soaked in and be absolutely adhered, fixed permanently part of the wool. Never going to rub off ever. But with other, I have done kits when I was just starting out myself, and I have noticed the wool rubbing off color-wise onto the backing material or onto my hand. These things can happen. So just err on the cautious side. And since you're on the computer, if you have questions about washing and dye and possibility of transfer or bleeding or leaching and things like that, ask specific questions in groups like our group, which is Rug Cooking and Punch Needle Club, because you will be amazed. Appaloosa is the spotted horse. Thank you, Gail. You will be amazed at how quickly people have answers to your questions, right? It's so good to be able to get those answers quickly. What happens when you run out of wool? And the answer is, this is the time to be creative. I've had this happen, and there are a number of ways to correct this. If you run out of wool and you cannot find any more in your wool stash, you can pull out a few loops around the rug and add an accompanying color and hook it, and it'll be fine. I'm going to paraphrase that in a minute. Just do not add the new color all in one patch, or it will stand out. Okay, so I'm going to stop there and paraphrase this because I've done this a million times. When you are right at the end and you're running out of a color, it makes a lot of sense. Let's say we're looking at, let's use an example. Let's say we're looking at, I'll use a new example. That's not a good one because it's already too patchy. Yeah, let's say we're looking at, that's a tough one, but because all of these are kind of the same red, white, and blue. Let's say we're looking at, oh, Boy on the Beach. That's not Whirligig Boy. Boy, this is Whirligig Boy here. Let's say we're looking at Boy on the Beach, right? So she's saying, let's say you were hooking that blue background under the proscenium, the curtain, and you got to the point where you were like, are you kidding me? I just have a tiny, teeny, tiny little bit more to do. It makes sense to pull from a few different places, not all in one lump, or it's going to look all patchy and like you made a bad mistake. If you pull from a couple different places and you add a color that is slightly darker, lighter, whatever, it's like you did it on purpose, right? And with many rugs, when I do this, I have a similar color somewhere else, and then I'll add it somewhere else. Like I really meant to do it. Like, oh, she must have had extra if it appears in the border as well. But no, this happens a lot, and it is a great time to be creative. But the takeaway from that is never just fill in. If you've got a regular patch or a little block, never just fill it in straight with another color. Pull from other places and disperse, right? Disperse. Make it all hazy. Make it all blend in that way. You'll be amazed at how pretty and marble cake that will look in the end. Color, she says, I often say it, if colors are not working well together, no one will get close enough to your work to enjoy the pattern or technique. Color is so, okay. I often say if the colors are not working well together, thus no one will get close enough to your work to enjoy the pattern or technique. So the other aspects of having worked the piece. Color is so important. If a wool that looks great before you hook does not mix in well with the others, pull it out. If it is not pleasant when you're hooking it, it will not get better. There are lots of colors around to use. Pull out the offending color and find one that is more pleasant. That's just a little typo. So I agree with that to an extent. To an extent, I agree with that. Where I don't agree with it is I often hook with materials that are a bear to hook with because I love them. Because I'm hooking with a plaid that has a little bit of metallic that I found at a vintage store. On that great day, we're out in the city and we found this store that was like, a wrinkle in time in the back of the closet in Narnia. And I found that plaid skirt, and then afterward we found that great restaurant. We had the rum toddies, and it was just the best day ever. I'm going to use that skirt. I'm going to cut it up and use that skirt. Even if it's a nightmare to hook with and the whole thing is difficult, I'm still going to use that skirt. So it really depends on you and what your threshold for pain is. But yeah, if the color's wrong and you don't like it, think about pulling it out. I'd give it a hot minute, and then I'd think about pulling it out. But it's up to you in terms of texture and materials that you're hooking with. Sometimes it's that memory wool feeling. You love it so much, it reminds you of something or someone, and you're going to use it, even if it's very, very difficult. You're just going to steel yourself and do it, right? So that part's up to you. These are tips of Polly's. So she has one way of working. We all have different ways of working. You pick the tips that make sense for you. How to dull a piece of fabric that you feel is too bright. You may dull with a coffee or tea mixture. inexpensive and works well. So in other words, find the cheapest one you can, right? Red Rose or whatever tea bag's fantastic. Stop and Shop brand. Just make up a pot of coffee, put the wool in a pot with enough water to cover the wool, and then pour coffee or tea mixture. Let it set, add a quarter cup of vinegar, dry and drain. Sorry, drain and dry, or either way works. Another way is to buy a color wheel at any store, or pull one offline, or the paint store, right? Look at the color wheel, and let's say you have a piece of mustard that is way too bright. So a piece of mustard material that is way too bright. What is across from mustard gold on the color wheel? It's purple. It's like iris purple, isn't it? So you mix up a very diluted 2 cups of purple formula. Now it would be obviously 2 cups. It depends on how much you're working with, right? I would always start with less powder, just to walk into it, because you're trying to dull it. You're not trying to completely over dye it. But what she's basically saying in this answer is using the color wheel. Blue is opposite orange, purple is opposite yellow, red is opposite green. You want to use the opposite color. It could even be a RIT dye. It could be a natural dye. Use the opposite color, just a little bit of it to try first, just to kill that bright quality, right? Sometimes it's ultra bright, like neon bright. I love that, but sometimes it's not right. You just want to kill the edge on it. You don't want to completely change the color. And these tips, the coffee, tea, or using the opposite color on the color wheel, are great tips, and we never hear these kinds of tips. And the last tip is called poor man's dyeing. Oh no, there's a couple more. Before I ventured into creating my own colors, I used this simple tip. I would gather up, let's say, blues, and see that they were all different, and clashing a bit. Put all the blue pieces into a pot of hot water, boil. Okay, so this is what Edith O'Neill calls stone soup, right? Isn't it? Put it all into a pot of hot water, boil, and then the water will all turn dark blue. Simply turn off the heat and let it sit in a pot overnight. You could also do this in a crock pot, something like that, right? In the morning, the water is clear, and that's good because that means the color has gone back into the material, and the dye has gone back into the pieces. They are all still different shades of blue, right? Because they started as different shades of blue, but they do not clash. This is also called marrying color. You marry the colors up. In other words, you've got 20 different shades of blue. Some are Wedgwood, robin's egg blue, but then you've got indigo, nightshade colors. It gets toward purple blue. You put them all into the pot. It all turns this big, muddy, dark blue. You leave them overnight, right? You turn the heat off. You just let them sit there and soak in their own junk. And then in the morning, the water should be clear because the dye has attached, as it wants to the fabric, to your wool, right? Helps if you put citric acid or a little bit of vinegar in there. It has attached, so the water will be clear, but it's now equally distributed. So the lump sum, if you're like a mathematician, the sum of all of those colors, right? It's very abstract thought, but the sum of those colors created that dark navy poop pot of muddy color, and it was equally then distributed among all the different pieces that were already all different colors, all different values of blue, all different colors, maybe all different textures, but now it's equally distributed. So they have been married together, and they will all have that one collective color in common. And amazingly, once that happens, they all match each other, and they can be used, depending on the value, somewhat interchangeably. This is one of the greatest tips. I'm sure that Edith calls this, I think it's stone soup, because I thought, oh, what a cute name that is. Another tip, 2-color rugs. I've been doing lots of 2-color rugs, mostly blue and off-white. When I do a 2-color rug, you can be certain that I will use 50 to 20 different shades of blue that will work together and do not clash. And same for whites. Make sure you use lots of different shades of the same color for a great look. I think that is a really great tip. Now for some other quick tips that have helped me. Keep your loops uniform, 1/4 of an inch high. Now, that is a preference. I'm going to say that's a preference. If you like tall loops or you intend to clip, you want them to be quite high. Other people, punchers, sometimes like them very, very, very low, right? So that is a preference. Do not hook tightly. Pull the loops up. That's important. I want to remind you that Polly is a primitive hooker, so she hooks with a wider cut, number 8, I think, or above. So this is a specific style of hooking. We always have to say that because if you're looking to do realistic hooking, and do lots of shadows and shading and realism, these tips are not for you, right? This is for primitive hooking. Pull your tail up when you start and finish and clip later. So I clip immediately, but she clips later. So that can be something that you choose too. If using a frame or hoop, make sure that your backing is taut. That's a universal. The tauter it is, the tighter it is in your frame hoop or over your lap if you're not using either, the easier it's going to be to hook for sure, and the faster. The easier on your wrist too. Do not carry your wool over. Do not leave a loop on the back. Simple cut, pull up the tail. I think she means simply cut, pull up the tail, and start on the next row. Enjoy. Yeah, this question comes up a lot in beginner classes. It's not, you should not be carrying loops across the back like it's needlepoint, right? It's just not good practice. It's not good practice. Nothing is going to immediately happen. There's not a vortex that's going to open and a hand come and grab you through if you do, because it makes sense in that moment for you to just do it and get on with it. But it's not good practice, right? Best practice as we go along. When we're talking about tips and trades, carrying over in the back, mathematical again, is not best practice. If you do it once in a while, just like leaving your tails underneath to avoid a ratty concentration of ends, these are also things that I sometimes do, I have to admit. So let's come back to the slideshow. Enough of my face. Let's come back to the slide. Hello, Alicia. Good to see you. Good to see you. Let's come back. We're looking at some great images of Polly Minick's work. Very summery. Wait a minute. I'll get there. I'll get there in the end. I just know you're looking at the horse still, the Appaloosa. Here we go. Oh, so this image came from that blog spot too, the Quilt Mania blog spot. This is just an image of a bike. There wasn't a title associated with it, but I've seen this many times. Just a beautiful sort of summer bike. It looks like a parade kind of a bike with a flag on it, little basket, those wild handlebar ribbons coming off of it. Classic Polly kind of an image, isn't it? And because we were working on this tonight, I felt like I had to look at her other book titles. Now, I could not, because it's me, put my hand on any books besides these two, but I have this one, and it is lovely. I think we've even looked at it, but I wanted to bring it up tonight because we're talking about Polly. Hold on one second. I'm going to have one more little swig. Hooked rugs and coordinating quilts. So this is one of the collaboration books that she does with her sister, Lori Simpson. This is a wonderful book, and I was able to find online some of the images, since I could not find the book at the tip of my fingers, some of the images and projects that are inside of this book. So this is what the cover of the book looks like by Polly and her sister Lori, and these are some of the projects you will find in the book. This is that hooked star checkerboard. Now, we saw this being held up as a much lighter blue, like a denim blue, but obviously you can do this in any color. This is super, super fun. You could do it in mixed colors, right? It's a very patriotic and simple pop art repeat pattern. So you do it however you want to do it. This is a quilt. So this would have been by her sister Lori, and I just thought, this is just so charming. Is this Parcheesi? You think this is Parcheesi? Maybe not. I was going to say Chinese checkers, but it's not the right shape. I'm not sure if it's an actual board game, but it is so lovely. The way that it's cut up, the way that it looks, it has that childhood feel to it, right? That nostalgia. The way that it's quilted in the border, those kind of circular shapies out there. It looks like it's right the way through, actually. It looks like it's carried through all those circles, the actual quilting part of the quilt. But just another beautiful piece, and if you are interested in quilting, it's nice to see what some of the other projects in the book are that are not rugs. A beautiful schoolhouse, like the one in the Quilt Mania book that I held up, Basics of Rug Hooking. This is a little bit different. This is more of like a log cabin with appropriately enough a log cabin hooked border. And you see how she worked with this ombre design of the red going into the kind of forest green, bronze gold color. Really smart. That flame color coming from one side to the next. It really adds a lot of interest to the border because it's not a difficult border. It's a quite simple border, and it's a very simple motif. So that worked really well with that piece. And counterpart is the quilt, right? So this is the quilt, real similar. We're still seeing what is the schoolhouse, sometimes just called house pattern, but originally it was a schoolhouse pattern. And then log cabin all around, but the way that the log cabin blocks are broken up, diagonal half being red and the other diagonal half being dark, black or brown, gives us the pattern that makes this red border. It's really electric. It's just lovely. with a mix up of 6 different houses done in different colors. There's a rooster down at the bottom, some mixed materials, pattern materials. Super, super, super charming. I love this one. Um, really beautiful. Same book, right? This is all from the same book. Folk Art Friends is the title of this book by Laura Simpson and Polly Minick. Beautiful old-time cat pattern, blue cats in this case with antique black background and a shaped border, right? Shaped. So you get this beautiful diagonal border that looks like quilted triangle corners, right? But in this case, it's hooked, and it's a much more complicated border, but the cat's on the inside, very, very simple to hook. Really lovely. That would go very, very fast. Lots of mixes of colors. That remark that she just made, for example, if she's doing a rug that's just blue and white, or in this case, blue and black, she's going to use 20-something colors of blue and 20-something colors of black. And that's what gives you this great variety and this great antique look, this great folk art look. This is another image from Folk Art Friends, the book. And this is a sport image. Remember, she has 3 sons, so she does a lot with sports images and old-time baseball images. So I think that's where this is coming from here, a lot of baseball references. Super sweet, super sweet. And this is what the back of the book looks like. Oh, I'm sorry, that's the front of the book again. Folk Art Friends. Is that the one? Let me just check. Wait a minute, I'm second-guessing myself. Hold on just a second. Let me just check back and make sure. Yep, that's the same one. Just making sure. I didn't want to be telling you 2 different things. So again, some images from these books, the schoolhouses, the combos of stars and quilts. This is actually the same pattern with the stars, isn't it? On the table as the rug. It's just colored differently and has an added border. But otherwise, it's just the same pattern, interchangeable between quilting and hooking. And this is what the back of the book looks like. So this is the piece we just saw. I think this is one on the table where the quilted one was on the wall. Yeah, that's the quilted one that's being used as the frame. So you saw what the front and back of this looked like with many of the projects that are in it. And if those appeal to you, you can see, although they are primitive and folky, they are very different than the American Summer book, right? Very different feel. So if you're looking for one Polly Minick book, choose one that you feel is the best match for you right now. But wait, there's more. Before you make a decision, I have this one as well. I'm going to make my business searching for it over the weekend. The Americana collection, Hooked Rugs by Polly Minick. This is another great, same border that she used on the last ones we saw, the sort of triangle, the point border. It's done more with quilting. This is what the cover of the book looks like. And again, couldn't find this book, but it has a lot of the repeat sort of patterns that we've seen, the red, whites, and blues and things. The show where we saw Polly Minick photos, that was from Hooked on the Lake. A lot of the images come from this book, or a lot of the quilts that were live at that show come from this book. So this is another great Polly Minick book that you might be interested in checking out. This, I think, is the most recent book. I just ordered this because I wasn't aware of this one. Interesting book, a textile tribute to an American heroine, the Spirit of Sacagawea. I know a lot of people say Sacagawea, but I was always told Sacagawea was the way. I don't have it yet, so I can't really remark on it. And there were not images online that helped me see what was in this book. I had to actually Google, because the front and back cover, maybe this is the back cover. Nope, that's one of the images in the book, but that's a quilt, right? So I started to wonder, even though it says a textile tribute, I started to wonder whether everything in the book was a quilt pattern. But when I read the description of the book on one of the review sites, it said rugs and quilts. So hopefully that's true, because I just ordered it today and I won't have it yet. But when I have it, we can look at it together, because this is just another great source for very patriotic looking rugs. This time looking at Sacagawea, who of course was the famous female Native American woman who helped Lewis and Clark. I hope I'm getting this right, because I did not prep myself for this. I only said it once a week when I used to give tours out west in Yellowstone and Montana and the Dakotas and all that. I believe she's the woman who was like the guide who helped Lewis and Clark find their way from Missouri right the way across, right? And it was her relationships with tribes, with specific people, with, I think there was a long-lost brother in that story. You should read that again. That was an amazing series of stories. She's the reason that they survived that journey, personality-wise, and in terms of being a great ambassador and speaker for this group of men who are just bumbling through on their way over these high ranges and impasses and all of these difficult winter situations, kind of Donner Party style situations. She got them out of all kinds of trouble with her skills, right? Her skills, having always lived there. But it's a beautiful story, and I expect this to be a wonderful book. That hopefully, if it's anything like Polly Minick's others books, it really touches on the history too and makes it that much more meaningful. I like the patterns that are featured on the cover too. I have to say I love that image of the two horses facing two different ways, the weather vane style horse. I really love that image. As a quilt square, I mean, that would be amazing, particularly for the kind of Baltimore quilts project that I'm working on right now. I wish I would have thought of that because I would have liked to have done something like that. It is really nice. A lot of designs that are very difficult quilting wise, compass rose designs, right, with that giant compass, and the pointed stars, like the 8 pointed stars and all that. Very, very, very difficult to do for a quilter, but even I think bordering on, I'm not going to say impossible for a rug hooker, but when you are doing that kind of point, very acute point, when you're doing your rug hooking, you have to do that trick where you pull your strip up in the middle of the strip, right? I do this in my classes all the time. I don't have my teaching frame with me, but you have your strip hanging down, you pull your loop up in the center, where the tip of the star would be, right? The sharpest point of it. And then you take one of the tails from underneath, hook down in one direction to define the side of that point, and then your other strip comes down the other way. So you've got as your placeholder in the middle one loop. You never want to get in a situation where you have to do more than one loop or cut another half there because you need it to be as sharp as possible. So there are ways to get around these kinds of really tricky designs with hooking. But man, it's not easy, I'll tell you. It's not for the weak of heart. So let's look forward to this book. This will be coming soon. I'll share it with you when it does. And that's one of the images from that book. This image I pulled off of, this is a Polly Minick rug. I pulled this off of the Woolly Fox. So this page was dead, but it looked like the Woolly Fox, and maybe somebody can help me out with this, either did or still do carry Polly Minick designs. Again, this page was a dead link. I tried again and again, and it's just not there anymore. So I didn't know if maybe the case is that they don't anymore. I couldn't really go any further with research because I did a lot for this show, and I had to get on with showing the kids a really great day, but a great couple of days. But I just loved this design. These are such huge, oversized lamb's tongue type curves, and in the center, so underspoken, this ultra faded little bouquet, this dainty, delicate little bouquet, and a field of a brown that really reads because of the blue, because of the opposite colors, right? The complementary colors opposite on the color wheel really reads more like a bronze, right? So if I was speaking in Cushing dyes language, I would say this is bronze green, right? Which does come out like something of a brown, but when you put it next to blue, it has that old bronze feel. Eugenia, I love the background too. I just love it. It's so smart. And you could really put anything in the center. A small bouquet is just precious. There is a lot to be said for doing a bouquet with absent colors, right? In a ghostly palette, because it reads like a silhouette, doesn't it? If you had a small motif, I don't know the dimensions of this rug, but let's say it's not that big. Let's say it's 20 something by 20 something. That would make for quite a small center. If you were to hook a bouquet like this with 6 flowers and 2 flags and lots of petals in different colors, you might find that you have created a pig's breakfast, that there's colors all over the place and it doesn't read well in what is a fairly busy border. But when you hook it in almost all whites with a whisper of color to it, it reads as a silhouette. And then it's much easier for your eye to look at that and go, oh, look at that little bouquet in the center with the 2 flags. It's just easier. It's a good trick. That should be added to the list of her tricks because she does this a lot. Now here's another book that's come out recently. I think this is the second most recent book for Polly Minick. And her sister Lori Simpson, Victory Girls. I have this one as well. Patriotic Quilts and Rugs of World War II. So this is right up both of their alleys, right? Very patriotic, lots of red, white, and blue, pulling from old postcards and images and old art, propaganda, Rosie the Riveter, all this kind of thing. So these are some of the images. Well, this appeared again, it was a very low quality image, so I couldn't make it any larger, but this is one of the projects in that book to give you a feel for what it looks like, right? So we have kind of a house motif in the center, some airplanes on the right, some canoes, some travel motifs, a traditional kind of platter of food. Sue's, good to see you. Little sort of lunchbox. Now that is kind of a Rosie Riveter lunchbox there. Lady Liberty, right? That's not the Statue of Liberty. That's Columbia or Lady Liberty. Female baseball player, American flag, right? So this has a very Victory Girls. This has a very female bend to it. The whole book and all of the motifs that you're going to find. I thought this was just another great book, and I have this one. So as soon as I find it, we'll look at it. I found on Pat Sloan's blog, which is called Pat P-A-T Sloan S-L-O-A-N blogspot. That she looked at this book at one point in a past year, and she took these photos. So these photos are from the Pat Sloan blogspot. She is a quilter. She has another great blog, but these are images from the book that, as again, I could not find the book today while I was preparing the episode. This was really helpful to find on Pat Sloan's blogspot. V is for Victory quilt. So you can see this is a beautiful, sometimes called cobweb quilt, right, with the sort of hexagon. But she's only picked out in black the sides of some of the blocks, and it makes a V. It isn't that smart. V is for Victory. And then done the black border. I think that is so smart. This image was also on the Pat Sloan blogspot, and this is a hooked rug. So this is in V is for Victory. So we know that, again, this is a book that combines both hooked rug designs and quilting designs, and is really lovely. Sue says, my dad was in the Navy during World War II. Oh, I'm so glad that you wrote that. So appropriate that we're doing this episode, right? It's nice to have those heart ties. Doreen says, I ordered the Americana Collection Hooked Rugs book for me. The Americana Collection Hooked Rugs book. Oh, that is a good one. That looks fantastic. And this is beautiful. I know it was on the kitchen counter forever. And don't you know, once I start cleaning, I cleaned this, and I cleaned, oh gosh, there was another one there that I had that I haven't been able to put my hands on. But yeah, this cleaning is dangerous. This is probably why you just shouldn't do it. Back cover for Victory Girls gives you another kind of impression of what this looks like. Really pretty, isn't it? Sometimes this block for quilters was called like a string block, meaning you were using long skinny pieces that you pieced together, sewed together, and then cut, right? And then you could do something in the middle, like a nice little embroidery design or a little saying that you pulled out of a magazine. Another, you know what? This is her most recent book. This is her most recent book, Blue and White, Minnick and Simpson. So newest branding, all blue and white quilts. And this is very elaborately staged. You can see this is super fine. There's the quilt hoop in the background where she does her rugs, a quilt hanging over the back of a chair, a couple of old game boards. That's probably part of a collection, along with the hat boxes, which look like they're certainly part of a collection. This is Polly and her on the left, and her sister Lori Simpson on the right, at a book signing for Blue and White. So another beautiful book. I think I ordered this one today, Blue and White, because I know I don't have this one. And I thought, well, this will be another fun one to check out. These are some of the images that Amazon or one of the reviews showed, sellers, not individual reviewer, not personal review, showed for the contents of the book. So you got to feel, you see this is a very sort of traditional pinwheel type quilt, but around the border, all of these appliqued beach pictures, sand pails, balloon, beach ball, the sun, some stars and a starfish and a kite. Super charming. Crossing over to the American Summer again. This rug is in the Blue and White book, and you can see she's introduced red here as a complementary color. But I think this is just beautiful. I think it's just beautiful. I love it with these little tips of red coming out of these faded buds, and in the border tips of blue. I mean, isn't that something? Two beautiful souls. That's right, Rita. They look like, and I thought, once I realized they were sisters, once I read that, I thought, what a life. What fun to work with your sister on stuff like this. Another image from Blue and White, and this is one of Lori's quilts, of course. Super, super charming. And this is the end photo I have for you for today. Hello, baby dog. For today's display with a bunch. This was in the, I think, Quiltmania page. Blogspot. So these are some of the rugs I see. Beach Gal. I see that swimsuit. I don't think we saw the America ship that's in the middle or the Clipper ship. I see Moby up there. another sort of game board design with some fish or whales around the edges. So you really get a feel from looking at these images, the kinds of things that Polly loves to make. Very, very strong summer feel, Nantucket feel. Those blues, the whites, the creams, the reds, super, super charming, very distinctive. But then again, books like this that have a lot of primitive colors that are more classic primitive, that are quite different. So hopefully that gives you a kind of good feel for what the books have inside them and what your style might be. Polly's definitely synonymous with like the blues, the whites, and the reds, and the patriotic colors and themes. This book really breaks from that, and Folk Art Friends did too. So, and is humble. Oh, so have you met them? Did you meet them both at a signing or something, Rita? Oh, that is so nice. That is a cute one. I mean, it's just such great work. I'm so glad that we finally covered Polly Minick in a more concise way, because we touch on her work all of the time. And a genius says, don't laugh, but is the significance of the numbers, is the significance in that in so many rugs? A genius, do you mean why are there numbers in so many of the motifs, like the one with the house with all the numbers on it? Because if that's what you mean, the answer would be because it's imitating a sampler, like the early samplers that girls in like Europe and America would do, where they were forced to do needle art with a needle instead of a hook. And dog's here licking my toes. And they would be practicing their letters and their numbers, sewing them beautifully. So sometimes when we make hooked rugs and quilts, we use those old sampler patterns because they're so nostalgic and historic and so charming. So often you see numbers in designs and compositions because we're thinking back to those early samplers. Thanks, Mom. Thumbs up for these videos. Thumbs up, like, comment, subscribe. Keep these videos going. A huge thank you to Patreon members who support me. I try to log on and do educational shows that support you. If you're supporting me too, I really appreciate it. I can really use it. I buy a lot for these shows. I really appreciate your help, your friendship, your support in every way. I appreciate all of it. I figured it out, Eugenia. I figured what you meant. And Rita said, yes, we lived close by and met many times. Are you ever lucky? Are you ever lucky, Rita? April says, I've learned so much tonight. I really appreciate all the research. Thank you so much. I wanted to create a good show that was full of good stuff, and I didn't want to cut any of it off. But I think we had plenty of content, even without the extra books. As the extra books come in, I'll look at those and I'll add some bits and pieces to it. But I want to remind you, coming up this week on Coffee Time, Monet stuff, talking about Monet, getting these swatch kits out, getting the painted pieces out, getting that class going. And I want to remind you, next Friday night is gallery night. So get me those images on ribboncandyhooking@gmail.com. Send me whatever you're working on, even if it's a drawing, and we can talk about the way that you see it evolving. We can all enjoy working on the process with you. Whatever you've got going, whatever you're brewing, whatever you've done, even if it's already finished, also great, of course. Send any images that we can look at together on Cocktail Time next Friday and enjoy. It was great spending this Friday night with you. I will look forward to Monday, Coffee Time on Monday. It was one of our great cozy shows, I think, Doreen. It was a lot of fun. I hope you all have a wonderful weekend. Nice American summer kind of a weekend. And I will see you on Monday for Coffee Time at noon Eastern Standard